Welcome to a masterclass on the requirements of a great first chapter. If you are an aspiring fiction writer or a creative writing student, this is for you. Your first chapter is the most important real estate in your entire book. Not because it has to be perfect. It rarely is on the first draft. It matters because it does three essential jobs at once. It is a promise. It is a hook. And it is the foundation that everything else is built on. Get it right, and readers commit to your story. Get it wrong, and it does not matter how brilliant Chapter 3 is. Nobody ever gets there. Today we are going to look at what every first chapter must do, no matter the genre. Then we will explore what your specific genre demands on top of that. So let's begin with the universal foundation. Before we touch any genre specifics, there are 5 things every first chapter must accomplish. These are not gentle suggestions. They are universal structural requirements. Let's walk through them one by one. The first requirement is to establish the narrative contract with your reader. Your opening signals the kind of story this is going to be. This is accomplished through tone, voice, and situation. When readers turn page 1, they are making a commitment. They need to know exactly what they are committing to. A quiet literary novel and a hard-boiled thriller feel completely different in the very first paragraph. That difference is the contract. The second requirement is to introduce stakes that matter to your character. This does not have to be the main conflict of the book, but it must be something the reader cares about right now. This is what creates forward momentum. If nothing feels at risk in the first chapter, there is no reason to keep reading. The stakes do not have to be life and death, but they do have to be real. The third requirement is to ground the reader in time and place. Readers need enough orientation that they are not floating in white space. But this does not mean stopping the story for a geography lesson. The best first chapters drop readers into a specific moment. The world arrives through what the character sees, touches, smells, and moves through. The fourth requirement is to create a compelling voice. Voice is the thing readers either trust or they do not. Whether you are writing in first person or third, the narrative voice has to be confident and engaging. A weak voice makes everything else harder. A strong voice can cover a lot of other sins. The fifth and final requirement is to end with momentum. The chapter should conclude at a point that makes turning the page feel inevitable, not optional. This does not have to be a dramatic cliffhanger. It can be a question, a tension, or an unresolved pull. Something that makes stopping feel like a small loss. Now that we have those 5 universal steps, let's layer on the genre-specific demands. Let's start with literary fiction. The primary focus here is character interiority and thematic resonance. Literary fiction sells on voice far more than on plot. The prose itself is the hook. Your first chapter needs to establish your protagonist's psychological landscape. Show us who they are on the inside. And hint at the thematic territory the whole book will explore. So what are the key beats for literary fiction? First, voice as the primary hook. The prose must be distinctive from the very first sentence. Second, thematic setup. Plant images and motifs that will accumulate meaning as the book unfolds. Third, situational specificity. Aim for sensory and emotional precision, not broad strokes. Fourth, tonal establishment. Whether your story is lyrical, spare, ironic, or meditative, make that clear early. The common pitfall here is starting with routine daily activity that carries no thematic weight. Even mundane moments need intensity of observation. Literary fiction lives in the granular detail. Next, let's look at mystery and detective fiction. The primary focus is to establish the puzzle and the main character's approach to life. Mystery readers arrive with a very specific expectation. They want to be intrigued, and they want to trust that the puzzle is worth solving. Your first chapter has to earn both. The key beats begin with introducing your character's methodology. How do they think, and what do they notice? Next, establish the crime or the central problem. It is not always in Chapter 1, but the mystery needs to arrive quickly. Then, create investigative authority. Readers need to believe that you will play fair with the clues. Finally, set the procedural tone. Is it cozy, hard-boiled, a police procedural, or an amateur sleuth? The flavor has to be clear. Cozies need charm and community. Hard-boiled needs grit and moral complexity. Procedurals need institutional credibility. These are similar subgenres, but they make very different opening contracts with the reader. Now let's turn to thrillers. The primary focus here is immediate tension and pace. Thrillers live or die on momentum. Your first chapter is about grabbing readers and never letting go. The first key beat is to open with tension. This does not have to be action, but something wrong, threatened, or dangerous. Next, establish the threat's scale. Is it personal, local, national, or global? Readers need to understand what is truly at stake. Then, show how your protagonist is equipped, or fascinatingly unequipped, to handle what is coming. After that, create urgency. Use time pressure, escalating danger, or an approaching catastrophe. And finally, end Chapter 1 with acceleration. Each chapter should increase the speed. The first one launches the trajectory. The common pitfall in thrillers is starting with backstory or setup instead of present tension. Thrillers earn the right to explain, but only by maintaining forward momentum. Explanation is the reward for not stopping. Now let's explore science fiction. The primary focus is world building without info dumping. A science fiction first chapter has a delicate balancing act. You are asking readers to inhabit an unfamiliar world, while still giving them an immediate reason to care. The first beat is to ground the reader in what is different. Show what has changed from our world through specific details and character interaction. Next, establish the speculative premise. The central what if should be evident without being announced. Then, make the strange familiar. Let your characters treat their world as normal, and let readers infer rather than be lectured. After that, create human stakes within the fantastic. Even in the most alien setting, anchor readers to something emotionally relatable. Finally, signal the subgenre. Hard science fiction, space opera, cyberpunk, or near-future thriller all take very different approaches. Hard science fiction can afford more technical detail if it is woven into character problem-solving. Space opera needs sweep and a sense of scale. Near-future stories need contemporary resonance, a world that feels almost here. Let's move on to fantasy. The primary focus is world immersion and magical systems. Fantasy readers come for the unfamiliar made compelling. Your first chapter needs to put them inside a world that feels real on its own terms. The first beat is to establish the magic's existence and its rules. Not exhaustively, but readers need to know magic exists and get hints about how it operates. Next, create the world through character experience. Show your protagonist navigating their normal before you disrupt it. Then, set the scale, whether epic or intimate. A quest to save kingdoms, or a deeply personal magical problem. The scope matters early. After that, introduce cultural specificity. Show religion, politics, and social structures. Enough to feel lived in, but not so much that readers need a glossary. Finally, balance the familiar and the exotic. Too alien, and readers cannot connect. Too familiar, and the fantasy is not earning its keep. Epic fantasy needs hints of larger conflicts gathering. Urban fantasy needs the magical hidden inside the mundane. And dark fantasy needs threat and atmosphere from the very first page. Finally, let's touch on horror. The primary focus is atmosphere and dread. A horror first chapter is a mood delivery system. The promise you make is that something terrible is coming. So let's bring it all together. Every first chapter, in every genre, must do those 5 universal things. Establish the contract, introduce real stakes, ground the reader, build a compelling voice, and end with momentum. Then you layer your genre's specific demands on top. Master that foundation, and readers will follow you past page 1. And that is where every great story truly begins.